Hi, everybody. Welcome to the annual TBR swap between myself and Bookborn. I hope you enjoy. Bookborn, would you like to introduce yourself today?
Yes, I'm Bookborn from the channel Bookborn. One of my favorite books that I read a couple years ago was The Book That Wouldn't Burn. People keep tagging me in reviews for it, saying thank you for recommending it. So I'm so excited to talk about it again tonight.
For those new here, this is Liana from Liena's Library. And people confuse us a lot. And that is a true story. People were thanking her for recommending The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and she had not read it. And people have gotten mad at me about my Sanderson takes that were not mine.
But and in fact, about Liana's. Dune too, right?
Oh, and Dune. Yes. Yes, that was the big one. Someone got like super angry. Like, I remember your Dune video, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wasn't me. Didn't make a Dune
I think
video.
You messaged me to be like, is it you? Did you have a spicy Dune take? Because someone thinks that I did, and I'm assuming it was you. I was like, correct.
It's a little disappointing because I think since I cut my hair, it's like less confusing now, which is so unfortunate, but it'll...
I mean, I think you just did the people a service so that they can finally tell us apart. They're like, oh, the one with the short hair.
First of all, I am also a Death Eater, so I don't appreciate this erasure, okay? This was purposeful. Let's see. Hello, everybody. Yes. Love Bookborn collaborating with Bookborn. It's a perfect day.
I'm also like kind of freaked out by how, because of my bangs, it kind of does legitimately look like I have short hair.
You gotta keep them behind your, just keep your hair behind. I was just thinking that, and then it's good. So yeah, every year we swap TBRs. Is this our third or fourth year?
I want to say third. But because we also like, we've done things that are not like a full-on TBR swap, because like you picked Murakami and I picked Gaiman, and we like swapped, but like not really, because we both read both. But
what an interesting swap in hindsight.
Yeah,
we hated Norwegian Wood.
A cursed swap.
A cursed swap. That is indeed, it was a cursed swap. I didn't. This is Liena's Library. She has a great channel. I'm supposed to be a better host than this, and you can go check her out. She talks about fantasy, and she loves First Law and A Song of Ice and Fire. And I don't know why Dune's back there, because I don't think she loves Dune, but it is there.
Well, I just reorganized my shelf, so I like actually have like sci-fi and then fantasy, and then like I have my Song of Ice and Fire books over here. And
and you got like the fancy. I only got one fancy set. I know my Harry Potter's is just out of reach, so maybe when we talk about Harry Potter,
I only have the fancy ones because like for my mom, whenever she discovers something that I like that there's more than one of, then she's like, good, I don't have to think about presents for the next however many birthdays and Christmases. It's just like, okay, you get one this year, and then the next one the next year, and the next one the next year, and like I can just get that until I run out.
Kind of great. Anyway, so this year I chose 5 books for Liana instead of 4. We're supposed to do 4. And so I chose The Book That Wouldn't Burn, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, Harry Potter 6 and 7. I'm going too fast. Fancy Slytherin versions of Harry Potter 6 and 7 to entice Liana. And then George R. R. Martin's The Ice Dragon. So let's start with the one I think you liked the most, which is George R. R. Martin's The Ice Dragon.
Yeah, and then like for people who don't know, we usually explain the method to the madness.
Why I picked it. So I'll start. George R. R. Martin's. So this is the funny thing. The turntables, as we say, that I am recommending you a George R. R. Martin book.
Next year, I'll have to think of a Sanderson that I've read that you haven't read.
That I have. I don't think that's possible.
But, I'll just contact Sanderson and be like, hey, it'll be really funny if you participate. And just, I know you have time. Just quickly whip up like a 1,000-page book. That should take you an afternoon that she's never read before. And
then. So I chose this because I read A Song of Ice and Fire this year, and I really liked it. Actually, Liena was the only person who knew I was reading it because it was supposed to be a secret. And when did I start tell you? I think I was less than halfway through, and I was like, I have to tell someone my feelings.
I was your secret keeper.
You were my secret keeper, and you kept it secret. You kept it safe. And I loved it. And then I read this because I found it at my half price books. So I was like, why not? And I loved it. And I saw that you hadn't read it, which really surprised me. So I recommended it as a book I was positive you would like, so I could feel good about something.
Joke's on you. It's the worst book I've read all year.
Oh, no. Okay, but for real, what did you think?
I thought it was good, except that like I feel like I'm maybe dumb because like at the end I was like, what was the point of that?
Oh. Maybe I cried on the airplane reading this.
Well, because like I thought like I don't know, because it was like fairy tale-esque and kind of like fable-like. So maybe I was just expecting it to have the way like a fable has like a clear lesson at the end or like a clear like, and it didn't really have that. And so because I was like expecting, it's kind of like if you're reading what you think is a murder mystery and then it turns out somehow that it's not one. And then you're like, wait, but I was expecting a death and for that death to be solved. Where is that part? So like I expected the ending to have like I don't know, like a bow on it to be like, you know, and the meaning of this story was like, you should always leave a note, like whatever it is.
I get
but
that.
Otherwise, I thought it was like really beautiful and like, you know, the illustrations were gorgeous. And it was like, I mean, I teared up like even towards the beginning when they were just like, you know, talking about her growing up and like them like not knowing like how to like care for her and like her being kind of alone. Like, I mean, it was really beautiful. I just kept expecting a lesson and then there wasn't one. So like, that's just like, it didn't, there's nowhere like, it doesn't say on the box that like, you know, lesson contained inside. So like, that's on me for expecting that.
Yeah, I guess I just really, well, first, let me address this comment. So there is 2 different versions. The original, I guess that was in one of his short story collections, has like an explicit assault scene when the like people come and attack their home in the house, I think against the sister. So that's in it. And then they illustrated it and released this one for children and took the scene out. Apparently that's the only difference.
I was gonna say, did they illustrate the other one?
No. So Kyle from Read by Kyle read the other one when I was reading this one. And he was like, I'm surprised you didn't complain about this. And I was like, wasn't in my version. And so that's how I figured it out. And then I looked it up and realized that was the case. So for me personally, this is the version. I haven't read the other one, but I would personally.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, having read this, I don't. Yeah, it didn't seem like something was missing. So,
no,
because there's definitely because like I know that like I think we've talked about this before. You know, like the position of like should you ever depict that, and I think we both agree that like it's not that like you should never. It's just like there should be a reason. Because I know some people think it's never ever is there a reason to depict that, and I don't think that. But I do think like you shouldn't just like throw it in on a whim. So like. For this story, like it doesn't feel like a story where like something about it is like thematically tied to such a thing happening where I'm like, I would have expected there's something missing here. I would have expected to see SA in here. So it seems to me that it was probably thrown in for shock value for the original. I haven't read that one, but
yeah, that's how I feel. I mean, I can understand maybe to make it more of a theme of loss of innocence or destruction. Like I can understand that. I don't think you needed it. I still think I got that pretty clearly. I think this is a non-spoiler, but I think what happens to our main character at the end is a more actually like devastating loss in a lot of ways.
Well, also like the idea that SA is the only way to show loss of innocence or villainy is also really kind of like lazy.
We've talked about that. Yeah, like it bothers me that's like the only way a woman can lose innocence, which is like I said, what happens to our main character instead, I think is a better metaphor for like the loss of innocence or whatever.
If anything, it kind of reminded me, like, I mean, it's really different, the story, but like that piece of it kind of like the transition of like, and like what losing innocence means in this like speculative context is a little bit like the dust in His Dark Material series and like how it affects children versus how it affects adults.
Yeah, that's actually a good comparison. And then like George's prose is always really good. So like, anyway, what did you end up
fairy tale on? I mean, I never rate anything as I'm going. I would probably rate it 4 because, like, I mean, it's so short that there's like not that much to it. But like, what was there? Like, it was like lovely, and I would recommend it, and like, it was charming, and yeah, the only thing at the end, I was like, where's the cream filling? Like, where's my lesson of the day?
I just, I guess, like, I also wonder, like, sometimes things about kids have start affecting me more since I've had children. So I do think, like, sometimes I get more emo about that stuff than I would have previously, which may not help things.
Or also, I mean, I guess not every, like, a lot of fairy tales don't actually have lessons, so that's unfair to expect that. That's really only fables. But like, have you ever read or like seen a depiction or retelling of, I think it's a Russian story. There might be versions of it in other cultures, and I think it's called like the Snow Maiden or the Little Snow Girl or the Little Ice Girl or something like that.
Like, I'm obsessed with that like story that you read as a kid, and it's like they wish for a girl.
Yeah, and she's like
and
made of snow.
Made of snow. Yes, I'm obsessed with that fairy tale.
I wonder if he was like inspired by that at all, because it's like a little bit.
I'm convinced that he was, because not only have I read the original fairy tale and I have like the kids book, I also read the Pulitzer Prize nominee, like a magical realism book that was based on that fairy tale, and they're all very like similar vibes. So I think you're right. I actually thought that. I should Google it, see if he was.
And like that fairy tale is devastating. So, you know.
Oh my gosh. Actually, well, maybe next year I'll just give you that. I'll give you, it's called The Snow Child, and I'll send you the kids book too. Did you come up with like, did you grow up with the purple kids book version?
No, I had like, we had like a bunch of collected Russian fairy tales, like in a bind up. And then also there's an adaptation, like a cartoon, like there was a series of like cartoon adaptations of a bunch of fairy tales that were like Mikhail Baryshnikov's stories from my childhood. And so there was like a bunch. So they had like the Snow Queen and the Russian version of Beauty and the Beast and like the Snow Child or whatever it's called. Like, so I saw that when I was a kid as well.
Oh, now I have a book for next year. I'll just send you the kid book and this. It's Snow Child by Ewan Ivy. And I cried so much in that book. It is.
And I shan't read it between now and then.
Very sad. Don't read it. Yeah. So you read so much. There's so few things I can be relatively sure you won't read. Anyway, yeah, it's short. I love George R. R. Martin's writing, and I actually do want. Well, look, I did it about. I read all of Neil Gaiman's work last year, and it just feels like really poorly timed. Hopefully, I won't jinx Martin, but I do want to do that. I do.
With great power comes great responsibility.
No. So I know you've read probably more of his stuff than I have, obviously, but. Anyway, yeah. Ooh. Solid choice. I felt like was pretty confident you would at least like it.
And it is beautifully illustrated. I mean, I also love that about the Fire and Blood, all the illustrations in that.
Yeah, that's why I specifically went and looked for the illustrated version for you.
Distract her with pictures. Because you think I'm Gaston. How can you read this? There's no pictures.
I just feel like if I'm going to give you a short story, it needs to at least look longer than it is.
No, it's a very pretty book. And I don't know if you looked at the naked cover, but it has a little dragon on it.
Look how pretty. Yeah, I mean, would you recommend it for people? Oh yeah, the favorite one's in the cover. I feel like that one's really pretty. I think if you like George R. R. Martin, you'll probably enjoy it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if someone has read like the Dunk and Egg stories, like, and they think that like it's going to be that because it's like another short story, like they should know that it's not that. That it's it's like the vibe of a fairy tale set in the world of ice and fire, more so.
Yeah, some people have claimed that they could exist together. It could be within A Song of Ice and Fire. I forget what their reasoning is for it because I didn't care that much, but.
I mean, it's not like incompatible.
No, but people have like made theories. People have been bored.
Oh yes. So, I'm assuming she's a secret Targaryen.
They're always a secret Targaryen, so obviously she's a secret Targaryen. Obviously,
or actually, she's secretly Jon Snow, and also same.
Well, I was gonna say something that was gonna be spoilery, so you know what? Yeah, secret Targaryen. Jon Snow. Perfect.
There we go. We cracked it.
Yay. Cool. The Ice Dragon. The next book I thought you would like just because it was safe is the nonfiction, which is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Mine is in the other room.
Which this is not material to anything, but the audiobook cover, which I complained to you about, has a picture of Oprah on it, which is unacceptable.
We need to explain to people why that's so unacceptable, though. I thought we were going to get there.
I mean, I just feel like I don't need to explain it. I think everyone should fully just be on board. The amount of information we've provided, why is Oprah on the cover? But anyway, back to what you were saying.
So this was my female rage pick for the year. Again, if you're new here, me and Liana usually try to pick a book that we classify under female rage. This one definitely is more like racist rage, but there's, wrapped up with female rage.
Oh, yeah.
But this is a nonfiction about a woman named Henrietta Lacks, whose
Not Oprah
basically cells were stolen. What was the year time period? When was this? 19?
Oh, it was like 80s or 90s, I want to say. 70s?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, like 70s, 80s. Her cells were taken for samples, like without her consent. And essentially, through a lot of story, her cells.
Oh, no, it was the 50s.
Oh, it was the 50s.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the 50s, that makes a little
like
more
I think a lot of the stuff that was done with the cells was more like in the 70s, but like when she was being examined,
when she was alive and it got stolen.
Yeah, was the 50s.
Yeah. So in the 50s, these cells were taken from her and used without her consent, all this stuff. But anyway, her cells basically are really good at replicating under cancerous conditions. And her cells have been the reason a lot of modern medicine has been discovered and created. Mm-hmm. Like, because her cells are so good under certain conditions, she gets, she's technically the reason that like so many of our cures have come to pass. And you can correct me if I say anything wrong, because I read this several years ago. But so the book is a lot.
It's like an inexhaustible supply because they replicate so easily and so quickly. So like whenever scientists wanted to do tests on like how cells would react to things, because her cells like multiply like bunnies. Then they were just like, wow, like we could just use this because like it's just like cannot be stopped. Like they just reproduce like constantly. So they're like, great, inexhaustible supply. We can do all of our experiments on these.
And so the book a lot goes, first of all, like the maltreatment of Black individuals, but I mean, obviously Black women in the health system, even today, but especially in the 50s, how horribly she was treated and how her family lives in poverty. Yet people have made millions and millions of dollars off of her body that was taken without her consent. And then just raises a lot of ethical questions within the medical community. And, how much, if anything, is the family owed? But it's a pretty visceral story.
Well, it turns into kind of a conversation that's similar to the conversation we're having now about like the right to your own image and like, when it as concerns like AI and stuff. Because there's the conversation about like a right, like people generally are like, well, like you, the person that you are right now, like have a right to say like what happens with you. But like when it's like a piece of you that's been like taken off of you and like, do you have a right to like say what's going to happen with like some cells that came out of you? Like how far does your like ownership over you extend?
And I feel like the author did a good job too of not always just like immediately taking the emotional side, because you read this story and obviously you're immediately like, well, obviously I'm on their side because it's so horrific. But she brings up a lot of good, like, well, how would this limit the medical community? And I just thought it was like a very fascinating discussion. So anyway, what were your thoughts?
I mean, it was a brutal read.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, the beginning is the worst in terms of just like viscerally like just gross content, because like she's like very, very ill when these cells are taken from her, and like the book does not hold back describing like her condition and how she's treated, and like what people like the various eyewitnesses who either saw her like alive or like who performed the autopsy on her, like describing her physical condition was like, I mean, I just like didn't eat breakfast for the days that I was reading this book in the beginning. And then when we moved past that and now we're just talking about the cells and what have happened with the cells and what people do with the cells, like it's still a very like, a harrowing read in terms of like it's heavy subject matter that's like very thought-provoking, and it's like horrifying what's generally happened, but it's not this like literal like on page like the like body horror, honestly, of like just her condition is just so like your absolute worst nightmare of like what you'd have to go through.
I know.
So yeah, it's anyone picking it up, like don't eat while you read it.
Well, and not only body horror, but also just like the condition of the family is also very like difficult to read about. In my opinion, It was very difficult.
That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of it is hard, but nothing was as like Well,
No, you
it's
did.
like
You're like, what
her
is
physical condition. I was like, oh my God, please stop telling me about it. I believe you. I don't need to know all this.
Yeah. But did you like it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good. I mean, I also just like how long it took to write this because the person who's writing this book, like she's kind of walking you through the process of like learning about this and then who she's speaking to and how long it takes to get that information and then she started talking to the family years before like developments that happen throughout this book that are like years in the making for like information being brought to light or the family becoming aware of something like this. Like she was like writing this book for so long.
I know. And it's such a detailed account. And I think that's also why it's difficult, like how much work she had to do to unravel the story. Melissa, this is interesting information. I hadn't heard about that. So I'm gonna have to go look that up. If you know any details, drop them in the comment section. But yeah,
Because like that
I
was
just
interesting too that like the doctor that initially took the cells without permission, he actually wasn't the person to profit from this. So like the people who have profited have like come down the line, and like once it's like so many steps removed, it's like, yeah, but like they didn't steal the cells, the people that are making money, they're just already in this bank and like they're using them and making money. So like are they like the bad guys for just like using the resources that are available to them in this field? It's like, are you supposed to go and do your research about where these cells came from?
No, of course. I doubt anybody even knew, right? How would they have known that it was taken in the horrific way it was? And then you also have this element of like all the discoveries that were made and all the people that were saved. At what point do you say something's for the greater good? Like, and it makes you feel icky. Like those aren't
Well,
like
and then
easy
that too, like
conversations.
as much as like it was about kind of the erasure of Henrietta Lacks, because like these cells were just called HeLa cells, like HE for Henrietta and LA for Lacks. So they just called them HeLa cells. And so for a while they thought it was Helen Lake. It was the person whose cells these were, but it was just like it was very like dissociated from any human person who it was. But like later in the book, they kind of talk about how like this would never happen again because like we don't attach a human to cells that we take. So like this book is about like the injustice of that erasure while also making the point that that erasure is absolutely the correct thing because like you having your name tied to cells that are so widely used and widely known is actually like a huge breach of your privacy.
Yes. And yeah, I mean, exactly. And how like should it have been that way? But also like, yeah, all the racism that she experienced. Anyway, it's hard to go over all of it, but I would recommend anyone reading it. And someone kind of mentioned that Oprah was in the movie. We just think it's really weird to put Oprah on a cover of a book that's about a woman who lost identity.
Yeah, the erasure of Henrietta Lacks. Let's put Oprah's face on the cover of the book that's about the erasure of this real woman.
I understand it's just like a movie book poster or whatever, like so many
of
people
all
do.
times to not do the movie tie-in cover.
But yeah, Harrowing we read. You've read Radium Girls, right?
No. You always ask me that.
Oh my gosh. No. That's because I want to give this to you. Okay, I got to write down. I'm getting all of our books for next year. This is great.
I feel like last year you were like, I'm going to give you Radium Girls next year.
But then I forget. I have the memory of like a peanut when it comes to stuff like that.
I promise I won't read Radium Girls either.
I was super interested, and I really liked the conversation, particularly at the end of the book, about are they really owed anything?
Yeah, because like that's also like in
sorry, my internet just kind of cut out. So if you said something,
I just said yeah, that like because like that's a lot of the time like in like when someone visits a lawyer's office and they're like this thing that happened to me because a person just knows like this feels wrong or this like I'm upset about this and like how can this be right, but then when you explain like the specifics of the situation, like the attorney will have to explain that it's not that I don't agree that this is a terrible thing to have happened to you, but the thing is there's no law that you can like appeal to. Like I get that like on a human level you're like this is wrong, but like not legally. Like there's no recourse. And it's not even that there should be a law necessarily, because like a lot of times it's like how would you like legislate that? Like the thing about like the cells, it's like, okay, if no one is ever able to use cells that aren't like explicitly like explained and agreed to by the person who's like donating them or whatever, like the amount of progress that would be halted, and like to what would be the benefit if halting progress has another benefit that's like equally like, you know, if the cost benefit analysis, so to speak. So like, it's like, oh, it would slow this down, but oh, the benefit we would gain is so great. But it's like, would the benefit we would gain be so great, or just be kind of like nominal comfortability with like, I know what's happening to my cells? It's like, just for the fact that you can be like, I know that. It's like, okay, is that as important as like finding cures for cancer?
It's hard to say. And like, even this, like, they're getting to sue another biotech company. Like Liene, you said, that biotech company is probably so far removed from the original collection of that sample.
Oh yeah. I'm sure the biotech company didn't exist when the sample was taken.
No. And so then at that point, it's like, are they really the one responsible for the reparation? Even though that feels bad. Like, I'm acknowledging that feels icky. It feels icky. You don't want to be like, you deserve nothing, but but
then icky. It's also like, because like the law is always, you know, applied across the board, not just a specific case. So if there was a law that like said that like they are responsible for reparations in the circumstance, like the implications of that for all companies using all resources at all times, it's like they would halt production of every single thing in the world if you have to research where every single piece of your supply chain like came from.
It would hugely harm the medical industry, and not in the way that would be beneficial, in the way that's like, we would stop working on beneficial medicine for people. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard. And yeah, it's interesting. I actually was randomly having a conversation because a friend of mine's a lawyer, and they were talking about how like they're right now trying to figure out in one of their cases how much emotional distress is worth monetarily.
Yeah.
And how difficult that is to determine, because there is really no real justice. That there's only like, well, we can try to pay you for your distress, and what is that worth? And how
it is the modern day equivalent of like ye olde Viking days, where it's like, oh, you like stole something, so you lose a hand. If you like, it's like, oh, which parts of the body are like about an equivalent level of like severity to what the other loss was to compensate. It's like a hand, an eye, your life. Those are the trade-offs. Oh, you are frozen. Or you're stunned by what I just said.
I don't know what's going on. I did hear you though. I was just gone. But yes. Yeah, they're making money off HeLa cells. That money's going in someone's pocket. I'm just saying, like, I'm guessing you don't pay for any of the cells they use. So yeah, that's where it's just difficult. I understand that it feels good to say that you should pay them, but just the wide implications of that has more. Anyway, that's why I think the book was so interesting, because I do think like emotionally you were on one side, but when you really stop to consider the ramifications and what that means broadly, you understand that it is a more complicated issue than it seems on the surface.
Yeah. Well, and then a lot of the conversation in the book, then it doesn't treat it as black and white, as like either everyone gets to control every little piece of them or no one gets to control anything ever. And it's like, okay, well, we have to maybe talk about where the line is, how much control, how much of you, how much like information needs to be shared. Like it's a matter of degrees rather than of yes versus no. And it's like, because, you know, you have to sign the thing saying you want to be an organ donor if you want to be, but like you have to have signed your like thing at the DMV or whatever saying that, like, can't just take your organs without you having done that. So like that's a level of like control that we have. And it's, you know, like, so how far do we extend that? How much is it, like, how can we like navigate, you know, comfortability and people's like rights to their bodily autonomy with, and also helping society at large? Like, what is that good middle ground that we can kind of like inch our way towards, where like for the most part everyone is like okay with it?
Yeah, and the idea also that even if we fix it going forward, that doesn't fix the past. And how do you deal with the past? Like, I think that's the other difficult thing. Like you said, I think we have made way huge strides in like body autonomy.
Well, a lot of the beginning of the book, when they talk about like what's done with her, like some of it is like, even for the time they weren't supposed to do that. But like a lot of it is also at the time, there was no form. There was no like request for this. There was no, like, we hadn't put in place those like measures, those safeguards, those like, you know, privacy and permission and like HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. Like that came later. So then like, if we have these cells that are from a time before those were requirements, then are you liable for using them now post those requirements being in place, because they weren't in place before?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I also think I thought a lot about like the other thing is probably a bigger, more important thing in the Black community would be like stop treating them worse in medical situations, which is still happening. Like we have data that in our year 2024, in America at least, I haven't read about in other countries, but in America that Black individuals receive worse care significantly, and so it's like that probably would honestly have a bigger impact changing that.
Well, and the book
I don't know.
also talks about, because like I think most often when the conversation is about the distrust, with that community and like with medical, care providers, etc., is like Tuskegee and like what a huge like a legit reason to be super distrustful like that was. And like Tuskegee comes up in this book because like some of it is happening concurrently. And like I think they were using HeLa cells like in like Tuskegee before any news broke of the Tuskegee experiments. And then the Tuskegee experiments broke, like the news about that broke, and then also news about the HeLa cells broke, and it was like happening like around the same time. And it's like, yeah, well, like I also would feel extremely paranoid and distrustful and angry, like like I in that circumstance I would have no benefit of the doubt for any doctor doing anything.
Yes, completely. And that's like long lasting, especially when it's like continues to happen. Anyway, so what did you rate that one? If you rated it?
Again, I haven't rated any of them, but I would probably rate it like, I don't know, 4.5 or something, 5, because I mean nonfiction's always hard.
Nonfiction's easier to rate 5. I rate nonfiction 5 way more often.
But then it's like a weird, like the way you think of it. It's not like, did I enjoy this book? Did I have fun reading it? Is it like, is the narrative voice like my cup of tea? Because it feels, even though that's not actually true, because like the quality of a book has no bearing on the subject matter necessarily. So like you could be like, oh, this subject is really important and really deep and whatever, but it was like this book was written badly. So it's like, It feels like I'm rating Henrietta Lacks's life story, but I also know that I'm not. I'm rating this author's ability to like synthesize this information in a cohesive way, not this person. So yeah,
correct.
2 thumbs up for this woman's life.
Highly recommend it though. If people haven't read it, it's a very, very good book. Just brings up a lot of interesting questions.
It's not a beach read.
Nope. It's a very, very heavy read. That's okay though. I probably should have given you like a warning on it, but I didn't. I just let you go in blind.
You say on it. I think just female rage pick. And then
that's all.
And then side note, and laws of racism.
Okay, that's what I said. Also female rage and racism.
Sprinkled on also.
Lots of fun. The female rage pick has been one of my favorites for the last 3 years. Just like it was accidental and it's been fun.
I feel like we're just like one of my favorite quotes from Hogfather when Susan, by Terry Pratchett. Have you read Hogfather?
Yeah, I haven't read Hogfather yet.
It's not like a spoiler or anything, but like Susan is Death's daughter, and she's the governess or the nanny or whatever for these kids.
I do know Susan because I've read books with Susan.
And like she's scared. The girl has scared because there's a monster under her bed, and Susan says, "Don't get scared, get angry."
Exactly. That's that. Maybe I'll just start writing that on the next one. But good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Ish.
I was like, enjoyed is a weird word for something so brutal, but
educational. I'm glad you found it educational and enraging.
It's a worthwhile read, yeah.
Cool. Let's do the one I was the most nervous about, actually, which is Harry Potter, because I don't really care about what you think of anything else. And I can tell the story about why I gave Liene Harry Potter if you're not on Instagram. Like our friendship has survived some things. Like I gave The Witcher 1 star, you gave Way of Kings 1 star, and it's no big deal. But then you told me a story that I wasn't sure our friendship could survive. I don't know, like 6 months ago,
that was pretty recently.
Was it later than 6 months ago? Earlier, you mean? You think it was closer?
Yeah, I just mean like it was like pretty like close to like us.
It was recently.
Yeah,
it was recently.
Like I wonder what you have chosen for me to read if like I had shared this devastating news like a little bit later.
Yes, I would have chosen this. And you revealed to me, because I think you revealed to me because I was talking about reading The Fifth to my son, and you were like, "Oh, fun fact, Okay, first of all, we're going to do Harry Potter spoilers because if you haven't read or watched Harry Potter at this point, you won't. So I'm just going to
in fairness, the 6th book was ruined for people on the night that it came out by a drive-by, so.
Yes. You told me that you read book 5 and were so upset that Sirius died that you just never read book 6 and 7.
No, I did read the beginning of book 6, hoping that the ending of book 5 was
that
like
Sirius
a
was
misdirect.
Yeah,
and it was clear.
Yeah, and then when you realized it wasn't,
way through, I was like, no, he's definitely dead. So I don't know if I care about
that. And you just never finished the Harry Potter series, but you watched the movies, which aren't even good. I'm getting angry again just even thinking about it. It's so upsetting. I'm so upset by this information.
Yeah. I actually thought you knew that. I thought I told you before. I didn't know that you didn't know. I didn't know I was this was breaking news. I thought I was just oh yeah, remember how I didn't read it, so I actually didn't get to that part of the book. I don't know what you're talking about.
I wish I had screenshotted it because it was literally flooring. I was so upset. I could not believe this. Anyway, it was when can I force you to read this? Now. And
it was opportune timing.
They're YA books, so it counts as one book. That was my thought process there.
The only reason it counts as one book is because you picked the Ice Dragon as one of the others.
Yes. I was nice, I did it. And this is in favor of my Sanderson pick. This was okay, instead I'm going to make you read Harry Potter. This
Before is Sanderson, Bookborns Sanderson was J.K. Rowling.
Let's not bring J.K. Rowling into this. We don't need to. We can just divorce that from the situation. But
before the Cosmere, it was the Wizarding World.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. So that's why I gave you these, but I'm nervous that I'm not. It would make me sad if you didn't like them just because Harry Potter was so important to me and I love them so much. But I also have heard every possible insult possible over my 30 years of reading these. Not really. 20 years, 24 years.
Wow, you're just really in the cradle.
In the cradle before they were written. Wow. Before they were written.
Time turners,
But anyway, I'm really curious to see what you thought of both of them. So break my heart or make me happy.
So yeah, I had technically read the beginning of Half-Blood Prince, and then had not obviously finished it. I had seen the movies, but I'd seen Half-Blood Prince, the movie, at least a few times. I saw them all in theaters, with my family when they came out. We would always go. So I saw every movie at least once. And then Half-Blood Prince, as they go, I've seen the first and second and third ones the most. Yeah. And then after that, I don't really ever watch the later ones ever. So I'd definitely seen Half-Blood Prince more than just in theaters, probably 3 times. So a little bit fresher in my brain of vaguely what happens in it. And then I rewatched the movies after I finished each book with my family. I got butterbeer and watched them with my family.
Adorable. Love it.
And as Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Part 2 were playing, I was I have not seen this since this was in the cinema. I was I'm not sure. I was I'm not sure if I have. Maybe it'll come back to me. And I was no, this might as well be a new movie to me. I saw this in the cinema. I know that, but I do not remember any of this. So it was practically not having seen it. So then also for reading it, reading Half-Blood Prince, I also then, because I had seen the movie at least a few times, then I did know the big things that would happen. There was not I wasn't a mystery to me. Deathly Hallows, I was vaguely know what the Horcruxes are, what the Hallows are, and kind of how this all goes down, but none of the specifics, none of the scenes, none of the character. I remember the list of characters that die, but not when that happens or where that happens. So Deathly Hallows was more truly a new reading experience. So I really liked Half-Blood Prince, the book, and in general, I've always complained that I like a lot of the characters are better in the books just generally, but Harry specifically, who's the linchpin of this whole thing, he's just got so much more personality in the books. And no shade to Daniel Radcliffe, because a lot of it's just the script that he was given / how he was directed, because we've seen Daniel Radcliffe is very capable of delivering snark, and he could have played a book accurate Harry.
Yeah, I think if he played himself, he would have been truer to Harry than their script.
Yeah, so I'm not in any way blaming Daniel Radcliffe, but just the character of Harry is much more compelling to read about than he is to watch, because he's such a nothing of a character in the films.
And in Half-Blood Prince, he makes strong choice, wrong choices, like very consistently. Like I told you that I get really secondhand embarrassed in Half-Blood Prince. It was a really hard book for me to read as a kid because he makes very bold choices that I don't think are present in the movie.
I like, because like I remembered the big scenes in the movie, and then when they happened in the book, that I was like, oh yeah, this is that scene. And then now watching the movie again after finishing the book, now I was like, oh, I didn't realize in this scene that because I just saw it in the book, that they didn't include, you know, this bit of like dialogue or this bit of text or this bit of context. So like in particular, the thing that stuck out to me, there's a lot of things that get changed. But like when Harry is talking to Dumbledore towards the end, and like Harry is like having kind of like an existential crisis about the whole chosen one thing and about how why he's the chosen one and what does that mean, and there's nothing special about him, that like he's, you know, he's kind, but like so what, like what, that doesn't mean anything. And like Dumbledore's like, are you kidding? Like, what do you mean that doesn't mean anything? Like that is like the thing that makes the difference, blah blah blah. They have this like whole conversation about that, because like Harry's like, oh, it's just like kind of an accident that I'm the chosen one, I'm not actually important, I'm not actually, so like they have this like conversation, and that does not happen in the movie like at all. They don't have this conversation, and I was like, that's like, it's not like eventfully important, but these books are like, when they're at their strongest, it's like when it's thematic rather than like, because the magic.
Well, it's funny you say silly. That because, you know, we just finished the 5th book with Parker, and then also watched the movie. And in the movie, the prophecy scene is shortened to like 2 minutes. And in the book, there's this whole thing about how like it could have been Neville, and it really didn't have to be you. And what does that mean? Is there any choice? And it's like giving Harry a lot more agency in his chosen one thing. And I really think it's actually a very interesting take on the chosen one. But in the movies, that's all completely removed. And it does make it less compelling, in my opinion. And like you said, it takes away from Harry's character as well, because he has no internal stuff going on.
Yeah, and I think that also makes it more relatable to like the young audience that it's for, is that like when you're told one thing about like what, like, you know, because people not like chosen one magical things, but you know, kids get pressure on them about who you're supposed to be or who you're supposed to grow up to be, or like, you know, this in this family, you know, dad is a lawyer, you're going to be a lawyer, like things like that, where like you have this like destiny or whatever, and like having to come to terms with like your own choice in that, and like, you know, do you have a choice in that, etc., like things like that. Like you won't really have to like face the dark wizard and who killed your parents, and like this will not happen to you. But like it's, you know, it's when things like that are like relatable for a kid reading it, that are like, I'm not going through that, but like I kind of get the vibe of this, the feeling of this. And like when you take that out and it's just a story about like magical hijinks, it's like, well, the magical hijinks are not that great. The story
is not interesting. It's a backdrop. I mean, that's what I think people really don't understand, and I always feel like they've watched the movie, and I agree with you, is that the magical hijinks are the magical fun backdrop to actually deliver quite a lot of like emotional turmoil that's relatable to children. Like,
that's why like in the first book, you know, when like the reason the Mirror of Erised works for him, and like the reason that he can't touch Harry, like it's not, you know, like lore about like the deep magic of like, you know, this is like how the magic system works. It's like, oh, you're protected by love and being selfless and like caring for others more than yourself. Like that's the answer to the riddle. And like it's like a thematically like significant thing that you can take away from that story. And it's not like, oh, the rules of this magic system are this. It's like, oh, it's about love. It's about caring for people. Like that's the answer to this magical situation. And like that's why I think it would resonate with kids and adults and like everyone who was reading it.
Totally. And also the 6th book also has a lot more like interpersonal stuff than any of the other books. Like even at the time it came out, people talked about it being like a slice of life Harry Potter book. And I don't think it was done as well in the movie personally. I want to hear your opinion on Lavender Brown, because I feel like they did her very dirty in the movie and made her like such a caricature. And in the book, she's silly, but like very believably silly for like a 15, 16-year-old girl who was very into that stuff. So I'd love to know what you thought about book version of her.
Well, I mean, but the same is true for Ron. So like they made her as much of a caricature. Like her caricatureness was like written to match his caricatureness, you know, like so
true.
It's not that's like she was like done dirtier than Ron. It was just like, oh, he's like a goof, so then she's his like goofy obsessed girlfriend, and they're just like the goofy comedy couple.
She just talks so weird in the movie though, and like I don't know. I've only seen that movie once, and I still like have vivid imagery of like I was so angry about it.
I really like in general. I mean, so like the stuff they cut out, like thematically being significant, like bothers me. But like the cinematography of the sixth one, I think is really, really good. Like I think in that sense, like it captures a lot, like especially as concerns Draco. Like I think the movie does a really good job of like showing this kind of like dark academia like turmoil of like what Draco's going through, and like actually kind of like focusing on that, because like the book is like we're not really facing Voldemort in the sixth book. It's more like prep for, research for, talking to, suspecting of, etc. So I like that it spends a lot of time on these kind of like brooding, like sinister shots of Draco and how alone he is, and how like they show groups of kids like chatting and he's apart and like in shadow, and like I think it does a really good job of kind of visually telling that story.
And it's in great contrast because he's always surrounded by friends in like the earlier movies too. Even though
in general, like he's like a jerk and he's kind of like frowning all the time, but it's always kind of like in good fun. Whereas here, like he's not even really frowning. Like he looks like nauseated and like out of his depth like the entire time. Like I feel like you from the beginning of the movie you like feel like sick about what's going on with Draco. You're like, oh.
Even though we're not talking about book 7 yet, did you feel like the books did a better job at portraying Draco's journey? Because it's one of my favorite things of book 6 and 7 is like the turmoil Draco goes through, and I think it's done okay in the movies, but particularly in the 7th book I feel like it's done better in the book.
Yeah, I think the 6th one does a good job with that, and then the 7th one is like there's so much going on and it does not focus on Draco. Like it's there, but yeah, it's not really. I think the 6th one is like the moment that in the whole movie series is when like they give Draco his like moment to like be the troubled anti-hero or whatever. But so then okay, so all of this being said, this is why like I think the book is better than the movies, but the 7th one is by far the weakest to me, because like the focus is so much on like the rules of magic, and the rules for magic aren't great. And I'm like, why is the answer, like, again, the Mirror of Erised and all of that was like, the answer to this was like love and selflessness. But like the answer to the end of this whole series is like obscure wand lore. Like this is not like thematically satisfying.
I mean, are you talking about the Elder Wand lore, or are you talking about, so you're talking about like the possession of the Elder Wand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like that's how we defeat the Dark Lord.
I was like, I thought you were talking about the rebounding spell. And I'm like, the rebounding spell isn't really lore. That's still kind of love.
No, the whole like, well, if you take it from him, and then he actually took it from him, but then but I disarmed him, and like actually,
I don't know. I ate that up as a kid. I ate that up as a kid. I'm not gonna lie, but I get it as an adult reading it. Like I get it. I can't tell you you're wrong.
Like I would have so much preferred if like the answer to like why the wand would work for Harry and not Voldemort was like some, it's always like kind of BS, the magic rules. Like it's never like really great, like a consistently like well thought out Cosmere like magic system. It's always just kind of what she needs it to be in the moment. So like if the reason in the moment had been something to do with like you needed, multiple people, you needed to work together, you needed to trust somebody, like that's why it worked for him, because he like had the support network to do the magic that would defeat him, rather than like, oh, well, he disarmed him and he disarmed him, but then because I was already disarmed, and it's like, I win.
Well, I can't disagree. I was going to say, that's an interesting point. The criticism when the book came out that I remember the most was that it was too slow. They spend too much time wandering the woods, because they cut that out quite significantly in the movies, because they don't have time to have them like sit
but
for
the
months,
movies are so much more of a drag for that part than the book to me.
I agree. Well, what's funny is like I think as a kid those parts did drag a little bit, but as I read them more and more as I got older, I actually liked those the best, because I realized they gave a really good like emotive quality of how horrible it actually would be to be like,
but also at the same time horrible, but like in the movie it's truly horrible, because like it's boring and miserable and sad, and like, so I guess it's conveying that, but like there was like a greater balance of like there's moments of joy, there's highs and lows, where like you have a sense for like they are friends and they're like in this together, so they're like bucking each other up and like trying to cheer each other up, but then like also they get really brought down by like the Horcrux being there and this situation being so like devastating. So like you just see more of that kind of like balance between them, whereas the movie is just this like one note gray slog of like, here we're in one place and another place and nothing's happening. Whereas like, it's a sense of like, you know, like treading and not getting anywhere in the books, but there's still like stuff going on between them. And like they cut out the whole thing about the radio where they like, you know, hear news and they're like, you know, oh, that's like a moment of like, I can't do anything with it, but like it certainly lifts my spirits to like hear there's people. And they cut out the whole thing about like the people leaving notes at the grave, you know, for like, you know, for Harry, like stuff like that, where it's like there's people that like you need those moments to keep going and that like people are in this with you. Yeah.
I'm going to say I'm a defender of this scene. I do need to say this because I am kind of a hater of the movies, and everyone roasted this scene so much when the movies came out. And I think I was the only one who liked it, which is so bizarre because I don't like book stuff or whatever. The reason I love this scene and I will defend it is that in the books, one of my favorite parts of Deathly Hallows is the relationship that's shown between Harry and Hermione, which is like very brotherly, sisterly. It's very close. One of my favorite scenes is them walking hand in hand to visit his parents' grave. Like they're so sad. There's, Ron is gone. It's like so heavy and they have this like shared connection and it's so unromantic. Like it's very platonic. And I love that. And I felt like this dancing scene was like, it gave me those vibes. Like Hermione and Harry were trying to cheer each other up. It was very platonic and they can't. And I like it. So
I feel like, the scene was like a bit cringe, but it was also the only scene from that whole like montage of, drudgery that was like something like, it's like, I would have preferred, the wizard radio or whatever, but like, it was instead of that, we got this. And I was like, well, that's something at least where they're like trying to like buck each other up and like be like, oh, we can like try to, smile through the hard times or whatever, like, so I liked what it was trying to do more than like,
yeah. If it wasn't for the wand lore, how would you feel about Deathly Hallows?
Well, so like, this is hard. Just prepare yourself. You're not gonna like this.
That's fine.
It was giving Rise of Skywalker.
Okay. Because it was like
it just devolves into this like constant fetch quest with like find the thing, find the thing, find the thing, find the thing, find the answer, find the riddle. This wand lore, this thing has to be destroyed with this thing, and then like that's what the whole thing devolves into. And I'm like, it should be like 2 things that are thematically significant and require like togetherness to like go and like fight Voldemort, not like 50 things we have to find. And then they have rules, and then like it was just like all the shenanigans. And I was like, why?
I will say, like, I definitely see that because I even remember thinking at the time of reading it that they have to get rid of some so quickly, Horcruxes so quickly, because it's like she ran out of time. And I did remember thinking like, we take so much of the book to find like the first one or like destroy the first 2, and then like the rest happens so quickly. So actually, that's a criticism I understand because it's like it does happen too fast, but the book was already too long. So you kind of like
also it felt like the well, it's not the first Horcrux, but the focus like the first Horcrux we really interact with, in Deathly Hallows, like the locket that they go after, because like he's already destroyed the ring before that, so that's like the first one, but we don't like do anything with it. But that one like felt more thematically significant to like the story and to Tom Riddle and to Voldemort. And like, so we spent time on it, and it did seem like, relevant to the type of person that he is and understanding it, where it's like, I understand why we took like occlumency lessons and like why we spent time looking at memories and stuff and trying to get to know him as a person, because it's relevant to knowing like what he would do and where he was at mentally, and the story with Creature and like how Creature was sent to get it. And all of that was like really good. But then it was like, and then there's like a bunch more that are all like, they're just like the Hogwarts house stuff, and they go and find them and they destroy them. And I was just like, oh, okay.
The other good thing about the locket is like how much thematically it plays into love, like why Sirius's brother backed out, and like that one of his followers was the one to destroy it, and how Voldemort seeks power in all the wrong ways. So like it is the most compelling for sure. And that's what I'm saying. Like the other ones do like, you get the diadem and it's like gets killed in fire really quickly. And I really,
would he choose? It's like he chose a bunch of like school mascots to be like the like. I was like, okay,
okay, I will defend that. I will defend that because I think it's explained in book 6. So I will be a defender of that, about his grandeur and all this stuff.
If it had been like Slytherin stuff,
I don't want to hear it, Liene.
I'll give it to yourself. But
keep it to yourself. But I think where was I going with this? I always disliked, even the first time I read it and now, I disliked the scene of Hermione and Ron going back into the Chamber of Secrets. I always felt like that was really shoehorned in. How did he speak, parcel tongue? I never liked that. I still don't like it. So I definitely think there are clumsy things with having to like get rid of so many. But did you like the scene? One of my favorite scenes in this book, and it's fine if you don't like it. It's fine. Is when they get caught and they go to Malfoy Manor and his dad is quizzing Draco about like, do you know them? Do you like, you went to school with them? Do you know them? And he's like, I don't know. Like, no, it's not. But like, clearly he knows it's them.
Yeah.
I think it's such like a good, I don't know. Draco's story ends up being one of my favorite because you have him in the beginning, like so pro Voldemort in book 4 and book 5. And then when the reality hits in book 6 of what it really means to be pro Voldemort, you see him like deal with these horrible things. And then by book 7, he's like you see what a kid
You have cut out and I don't know what you're saying. Okay, well, I'm sure it's very, very good insight into the Draco, into the Malfoy family. Oh my god, are you coming back?
Can you say it again? My internet, I'm going to try to tell Zach to fix my internet. Can you say whatever you were going to say again about my Draco thing?
I was saying that you've been cut off, and I was like, I'm sure whatever you're saying is good insight into Draco, into the Malfoys, but I don't know what you're saying because you froze. Oh no, you froze again. Well, yep. I guess you're being sabotaged by the muggles. It's that muggle internet. So I guess that means my opinions are the correct opinions because the Bookborn's not here, so Bookborn 2.0 taken over. And yeah, it being the Ravenclaw and Gryffindor and Slytherin items is silly. I accept Slytherin. He might do some Slytherin items. I do not see him going after... Oh, it's truly just me now. Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Hope you're enjoying. I truly am Bookborn now. This is Bookborn's channel. Nothing to see here. Nothing's changed. There will be less Sanderson content now. I'm sorry to have to say. It's going to be much more First Law content than you were.
This is not sounding good. This is not sounding good. Apparently I got kicked out, and I'm going to assume you agreed on everything I said about Draco. Was a great scene, and the end.
Yeah, you got cut off when you were talking about Draco, but like in general, yeah, I mean, I liked Draco's arc, and yeah. But like, okay, just like the items being fetch questy and Rise of Skywalker-y, I also was like let down by
First
the
of all,
depths.
okay, can we just take back a second? I just feel like it's really, really mean to compare it to Rise of Skywalker.
Told you to brace yourself.
Unfair. So I feel like you should walk that back and take that. So you can say you dislike it, but it can't be that mean. I won't allow it.
I think like the problem, so like Rise of Skywalker like would have worked better if like we had, 6 stories of like these characters, like we get to know them and we care about them and we care about this world, and then watching them go on this like fetch quest, it's like, yeah, but I care about them and like what their goals are, and I care about their quest to just destroy their enemy. But like we didn't have that. We still didn't even know these characters. So then truly just having a fetch quest with them in the last movie, it's like, okay, why? So like the 7th book, the Deathly Hallows, it's like I care about these characters and I care about seeing them defeat Lord Voldemort, so I'm like invested in this journey. But like in terms of like what the plot is, like in bullet points of like what they're trying to do throughout this story and how it wraps up, I'm like, I really hate that for them. I want it to be this like, again, like I want it to be more like how a lot of the other ones in the series did end, where she was like, well, magic is magic, but really this is about friendship. Really, this is about love. Really, this is about like, being selfless. And so like, yeah, that's like, I was like, why are we spending so much time on this?
I just have to say that this is an absolutely incorrect take. So love to hear your opinion. The reason it's incorrect to me is one of my favorite parts of the book is that he uses the Elder Wand to heal his wand, because I was devastated when Harry's wand broke. That felt like a character. When Harry's wand broke, I was like, oh my gosh, his wand broke. So disagree. I'm so glad he healed his wand and then put it back with Dumbledore. I thought that was good. That's my opinion.
I just think everything to do with the Elder Wand is frustrating, so I don't care if it's broken or
I'm glad
fine.
you at least liked Half-Blood Prince.
I actually like the sloggy part of the movies, which is, you know, when they're just like trudging along. I thought was like the best part of the Deathly Hallows for me, like because it felt emotionally resonant. And then like, yeah, the deaths, like Dobby's death, I cried over. But then like all these other deaths that like happen off screen, and you're like, oh yeah, this and this person died also, and it's just like, what? like they didn't even get like
people. When people ask me like, oh, what's the death that's worse in like the Harry Potter books, and they always want me to be like, you're not putting like Lupin up there, and I'm like, no, because you never feel their deaths. Their deaths.
But so then that's why like the fetch quest, I'm like, I don't want to watch you like finding like items to destroy. I want to see the moments where like characters we care about are like fighting to the last and dying, and we're saying goodbye.
Correct
like
me if I'm wrong, Liene. His wand never breaks in the movie. Correct me if I'm wrong. His wand does
break, because that's why then he
doesn't use
the
Elder Wand to heal it, does he?
No.
Okay. I'm like remember specifically when I saw that movie that doesn't happen.
Yeah, he definitely broke it, which is why then he needs a new wand later, and that's why, because he gets Draco's wand.
Wand. I just didn't remember if they had that in the movie. I think there should have been less Horcruxes, but I think it didn't work. Like it didn't make sense because they needed Voldemort to be very bad and split his soul into 7. But maybe they needed it more like Voldemort or Dumbledore. I've already found 3 or 4. Maybe it needed to go into book 6 with I've already found some.
But also, I know the book is called The Deathly Hallows, but like the Deathly Hallows added nothing. They're so silly to me. Just make it about destroying.
Someone else in here agrees with you. I so many people hate the Deathly Hallows. I am not a hater of the Deathly Hallows. I think it wasn't necessarily needed in terms of like Harry, you know, he was the one. I don't get why people hate them so much. It's fine to me.
Like by itself, the story of the brothers and like what they each are and like all that like was like good and it was interesting. But like when it comes down to like, you know, it's like, you know, when Frodo destroys the ring, it's not because of like a random loophole of like ring like rules that were obscure and like, oh, actually he was holding the ring, but then he was holding the ring, but then that's why it was like that would be really narratively unsatisfying, which is like kind of what happens with the wand at the end. It's like when it comes down to like defeating Voldemort, like it's like what I was watching Yu-Gi-Oh as a kid. Like there was always like, oh, he's defeated, but then actually there's this secret rule that nobody knew about where now he wins.
But counterpoint though is it also was about Snape was never yours. Like Snape, who was like one of your most important allies, and you didn't listen to him and you killed Lily Potter and you were like, well, find another woman because you didn't understand friendship or love. Like that's what really the wand lore is about. Like, you know, you didn't win because Snape didn't kill Dumbledore on your orders. It was on Dumbledore. So I think it does make sense, and it's fine that you don't like it, but it does add that element. So.
And then Will Snape. Like, I think he's a really interesting character. I hate the way people romanticize the way.
Oh my gosh, me too. Should we make a Snape video? Actually, I'm gonna do that for my Patreon one day. I have a rant about the way people talk about Snape drives me crazy. And my theory about this, tell me if you agree with this at all, is that a lot of people who read Harry Potter for the first time obviously were children because it was a children's series. And children, well, not children, but you might not have read any books with complicated, like gray characters. So people keep wanting to put so many of the Harry Potter characters into good and bad. And I think that is exasperated by the fact that in the beginning of the series, J.K. Rowling really wrote that way. Characters were very like comically good or comically bad.
That's how a child would understand their world.
How a child would understand their world. And when we get to the end, especially, people misunderstand Dumbledore too. People are like, Dumbledore was a villain the whole time. He used Harry. People say that all the time. And I'm like, did we read the same book? The whole point of book 6 and 7 is about how flawed Dumbledore is as an adult. And the adults.
I mean, the one part of the Elder Wand-ness that like, when it's not in the movie, that I kind of liked was like the post-death, you know, bit where like Harry's talking to Dumbledore. And he's like, you're like the greatest wizard, though, and like having the wand and everything. And Dumbledore's the one that's like, I turned out to be kind of power hungry, and I kept myself in a school because I was like, I need to like put a check on like my ambitions. And like, I am very talented. I'm not going to lie about that, but like, I am not as good a person as you, Harry Potter. Because going back to the Half-Blood Prince conversation of like kindness and selflessness, those aren't nothing. And so like that isn't in the movie. And I also think because like that conversation with Dumbledore is like, it doesn't make him a better character, or it doesn't make him like a gooder character, but it does like kind of humanize him in a way where it's like, no, the reason you want to villainize him so hard is because it's like, oh, he has to be the perfect, like all wise, all knowing wizard that does the right thing all the time, or he's a villain. And it's like, no, he was like, a dude that was very powerful, generally had good intentions, was led astray, especially in his youth, and was like faced with the end of wizard kind and the evil Dark Lord and what to do about that, and was like kind of trying his best to guide what he could and to help where he could, and he didn't always get it right, but like,
well, yeah, and it's just, I think a lot of it is about even like with Snape, who again, I 100% agree, I cannot believe the way people romanticize Severus Snape, but I think it's like it's part of like what we realize at near the same age, right? Harry's like 17, 18, and when you become that age, you start realizing that your parents are like human beings and very infallible, and these like adults you've looked up to your whole life are flawed. And like, it's one of my favorite parts of the seventh book as well, and it was difficult for me to read as a 17-year-old because I was Harry's age when that book came out. I might have been 18, but it was difficult to read all those things that Rita Skeeter is writing, where you know that she lies, but you also know that the facts are probably true. So even if she's editorializing incorrectly, and you're like, oh, Dumbledore wasn't like this perfect.
Yeah, she's like painting it in as bad a light as possible, but like,
yes, but it's still events that happen. And I love also the scene at the dance where like he's trying to feel better by that one guy, Daedalus Diggle, I think, or something. And he's on the opposite end being like, no, Dumbledore was like the most perfect human. And Harry's like so unsatisfied. Like, well, that doesn't address any of my problems. I just think it's like,
and the movie totally cut out the conversation about the sister and like almost everything to do with Grindelwald, but they do show Grindelwald, and I was like, why bother showing that when you like didn't go into any of that at all?
I know. And so I think people do the same thing with Severus Snape, where at the end, okay, you find out that he's been giving up a lot for the other side, and he gives up his life to save Lily's son. And they're all of a sudden they're like, oh, so that means good. That means good. It means he's been good the whole time. And it's like, he ruthlessly, not as much in the movie, but in the books, ruthlessly bullies children. Like ruthlessly.
Snape is a spork.
What does that mean?
In Wall-E, when there's a cup of
I've never seen Wall-E.
Well, Wall-E, the trash robot, collects trash that he thinks is cool, like that he just keeps for his personal collection. And there's this adorable scene where he's found a spork and he takes it to his collection, and there's a cup of forks and a cup of spoons, and he's like, and then he just puts it in the middle.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like, that's the point. Dumbledore was a complicated human. Snape was a complicated human. Sometimes good people have done bad things, and
and I think the movie also like makes it sound more like Harry has done that, where he's like, oh, Snape officially good now, because in the movie, like, we only really see Harry and Ginny's like one son, and that his name is Albus Severus, and like your one child, your one son, you named him Albus Severus, and it's like, what I thought that, because I'd never read the book, that I was like, oh my god, I can't, because then I was even angrier about the Snape thing, because as far as I knew, the only thing Snape like that redeemed him in terms of like Harry's personal life is that like, okay, like he was actually trying to defeat the Dark Lord, but he's been an asshole to you like your entire life. Like he's bullied you. Like he was like weirdly obsessed with your mom. Like these aren't like not great things. Like he's not like as villainous as you thought he was, but he's also like not great. So to like, in one of your like 50 children, to give one of them a middle name of Severus is so different from your one and only son being named Albus Severus, which is what it is in the movie, where you're like, what? There's so many other names you could choose.
I know. I totally agree. But yeah, I think a lot of people has a hard time. I just want to address this. I don't have a Patreon. It's just that like, if I ever got one someday, one of the videos I want to do is an every Harry Potter opinion I've ever had. If I ever get one.
It's gonna be a 4-hour video.
Oh, for sure. It would be 3 to 4. It might have to be 2 parts.
Like Deathly Hallows Part 1 and Deathly Hallows Part 2.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, overall, did you feel like it was beneficial to read them?
Yeah, well, like I said, like just knowing that he has other kids named other things is great information. I still like the characters. I mean, even though like again, like thematically, I find it really unsatisfying the like fetch questiness of the last one. There's still enough, like even the like sloggy part and even the parts where we are, in the Battle of Hogwarts and everything. Like there's just more character stuff that's like actually being, talked about. The conversation with Dumbledore is better. So like even though like the answer to how this is going to shake out, like how they defeat him, is just like book and movie. I mean, it's the same. It's like unsatisfying to me that like that's how this is like ended. Like that's how we put a pin in this. But the stuff surrounding it, which was kind of always its strong suit anyway, like the friendships and the, the relationships and what, it means to be a hero, what it means to sacrifice, what it means to have friends, all these kinds of things. They are much better in the book, even in the last one, even though the last book is my least favorite. So like my impression of Deathly Hallows when it was only the movies was like, ugh, just like what a downer of an ending. What was the point of that? And here I was like, like kind of fumbled the landing, but like not as badly as I thought.
Matt, I totally disagree. Look, I'll admit this online. I don't really admit this to a lot of places. There's only 130 people here. It's fine. I won't even admit how many times I've read this book. I want you to think of the number you think I've read the Harry Potter series, and I want you to know that whatever number you're thinking of, it is not high enough, and it is probably not close to high enough. I actually don't think this at all. I think she had very specific character arcs pretty early on in the series, and there are a lot of hints that she did. However, if you want to criticize Rowling on anything in her writing, even as a child, I noticed so many inconsistencies in the magic. Like, even as a child, I would point out to my parents, like as a 14-year-old, I'd be like, she said something different in the last book. This is a plot hole. Like, her magic has plot holes everywhere. And I will admit it.
Oh no, we knocked over the cabinet with the time travel magic. We can never time travel again.
Hates her, but the interview of her talking about that is actually hilarious. It's literally like, oh, I made this thing for a plot. And she like says this. She's like, and it was a terrible mistake. And so I had to pretend I broke them all because it would ruin everything. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate the candor of being like, that was stupid. And so I really don't think she thought the magic through. And I totally agree. But the thing about Harry Potter is like, it's pure vibes. So like, yes, I think that's really hard for adults. But like as a kid, well, I did notice as a kid, but I didn't care. But another thing she does really poorly is money. You reread this series and see the inflation of how much money changes value. That's for your guys' next reread. Money is not consistent.
Well, also just it kind of irks me that like I always forget because of like how he's raised that Harry Potter actually has a lot of money. And so then like the amount of times when I'm like, couldn't you like give the Weasleys some money?
Oh, I know. I think that they try to explain that away, but anyway. Only one of those guesses is higher than what I've read. Every other guess is less. So that will give you a good ballpark for how many times I've read that series. My sister used to open the books when I was a teen. So think of how much less I had read them as a teen. She would open some of the books and I would finish sentences. She would read a sentence and I could finish them. So it's deeply personal. And I actually don't know. I know it's over 30. I stopped counting at 30. So
is it the same? Like, is it always like you've read them all an equal number of times? Or are there some you've read more?
I've probably read the last couple books much less. Maybe that is around like 15, 16. It's probably, and then the first few, because they came out earlier, I've read way more.
Oh, but I thought of another thing that like book to movie is weird because like the movie does a thing that the book doesn't do. But then it doesn't do the thing that anyway. So like in the beginning of Deathly Hallows, in the book, the Dursleys are very much still like jokes. Like it's still funny that the Dursleys are the way they are. And again, the movies, they just once they get dark, they stay dark. They don't like balance it with some comedy. And that's when I was saying, oh, where's the whimsy? And you're like, there's no whimsy in Deathly Hallows. And I'm like, the Deathly Hallows book does still have whimsy. The movie does not. Like the Dursleys are like, why do we have to leave? And then like Dumbledore coming to the door and him being like, like it's like funny when the Dursleys are leaving. Whereas it's all just like, it's the vibe of like leaving during the London Blitz, because we're all going to get bombed is like the vibe of the movie. And it's like, I mean, I guess that's more accurate to, their situation, but like, Jesus, can we have a joke? But like in that scene, which is much more, it wouldn't work the way the book is because it's a very like kind of like funny scene. So this like wouldn't be appropriate in the book, but in the movie, because it's like darker and more serious. And then actually like the Dudley gets like a little moment of like actually supporting Harry in the book where he's like, no, I think we should go. And like that doesn't happen in the movie. But anyway, but there's a moment with Petunia in the movie where she like is just her and Harry, and she's like, you know, you lost your parents, but like I lost a sister. And like she has this moment of like she's not being tender with him, she's not being like warm, but it's still this like acknowledgement of like, you know, like it Lily meant something to her, and like she has whatever feelings she has about it, but like that's like a piece of like why she is the way she is, and then she leaves. So like that is like a moment that like I liked that they didn't have in the book. But then later when we do the whole flashback of their childhood, we don't have anything about like Petunia actually wanting to go to wizarding school and like writing to the headmaster and wanting to get in, and Snape finding that out, and Snape being actually like worse even in childhood than he is like in the movie. And the movie is just like, oh, he loved Lily, ta-da, as opposed to like he was even kind of manipulative and possessive and weird even as a kid. And he's like kind of cruel to Petunia, and like where Petunia is like, you know, very sour grapes about wizarding and is like that way for the rest of her life. But it's like this like humanizing moment for Petunia that's not in the movie then either.
Yes. And it's a good point, because you also, is it in the movie where you get implied that Snape was abused as a kid? Because that's also in the book.
It's in both. Yeah.
Okay, it is in book. So I was like, that also is like, okay, so people yelled and were mean to him, and so he is now mean to everyone in turn. It's kind of like a more complicated thing. Anyway, we talked a lot about Harry Potter, so let's go on to the next book that like, I mean,
it was 2 books.
It's true. And I'm not sorry in any shape sort of way about it. Aren't those editions cool though?
They are.
I'm
but
a big fan.
I mean, I hope you know I did already. I mean, I did own the Deathly Hallows, even though I hadn't read it.
Oh, I know you did, but like the thing is that we buy you books to read. That's why I specifically bought a different edition, because I was like, then it'll be like fancy.
I just was like, you know, I thought she knew I hadn't read this. Does she also think I literally don't even own it?
I knew you
do own it.
I knew you owned it, but like that wouldn't be fun if I was like, here's a sticky
note.
Go
read that book that you should have read.
Yeah, that's not fun. So
those are cooler editions. Thank you.
So the next book was The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. This was the first Mark Lawrence I've read. I know you read other Mark Lawrence and didn't like it. Unfortunately, because I haven't read other Mark Lawrence, I don't really know if this was going to have the same problem. So I was already wary about that. But
I know, well, you hadn't read any Mark Lawrence before this, but you haven't after either. It's still only like this series. Because you read the
still
second
only
one, right?
the first and second one. So I chose this just because I really like it. And so it was like, it's fantasy and I want to see if you like it. I was the least confident about this pick because I can say this now. Well, actually, I said this in my non-spoiler review as well, which is like, how you feel about time travel is going to be a big determiner for this book. And for me, I have never minded that time travel makes zero sense. I will let it go. Like, but I know a lot of people can't. And so I said that in my review, and some people were like, I'm so glad you said that. I will not read this book. So I don't know how you feel about that, and I didn't want to give it away.
Like our first time that we did this, you gave me a time travel book too.
I did, but that one is like, not really. It's like 100 pages.
I'll say, so we get a feminine rage pick, we get a time travel pick, we get a
yeah. Those are like the only time travel books. So anyway, that if there's a sticking point, I feel like that will be your sticking point personally. But anyway, give it to me. Tell me the verdict.
The time travel didn't bother me, or like I felt neutral about it. Whatever issues I may or may not have had, that was not it.
Okay. Well, so, this is the time you get to tell me. You don't have to be coy anymore.
So I've like thought about, I can't think of a better way to phrase this that sounds less harsh. And like, this sounds really harsh, but like, it's the only way I can think to say it. So let me say it and then explain. So like, this was like a Frankenstein's monster of so many other things, and both better and worse that I have read. And it felt to me less like a book and more just like, well, this is like that, and this is like that, and this is like this, and I liked it better when this was like this, and this reminds me of a terrible book, so it's better than that, but like it's reminding me of that bad book because it did that thing that annoyed me. So like it would just felt this like cobbled together like pieces of things that I've seen elsewhere, and in a way that like didn't totally like hang together. So that's why it still felt like Frankenstein's monstery to me, where it's like, when I can see that like that arm and that head came from different places and they're put together in the same body. So I feel like there's like so many things in this that like, because they did remind me of things that were in books that I did like a lot. So it's not that like the concept doesn't work for me or that the idea doesn't work for me, but like, maybe it's because there was so many different things happening, because there's so many different things going on.
There's a lot happening in the book.
And like, so I kind of feel like we should have like kind of focused in on like one or two things.
Give me a rating to help me understand. Like, is this like a 2-star? Is it a 3-star? Is it like, just give me a general ballpark here.
I think a 3 because like it's, you know, it has good things in it, but like I've seen it done better. So there were so many like literally like lines, like not like a moments in the book, like literal lines in the text that I was like, this is like a AI version of what Patrick Rothfuss wrote. It's like these are like almost the same words, like rearranged slightly worse than what like Patrick Rothfuss wrote in The Name of the Wind, or like this is a rearranged.
Yeah, but at least Mark Lawrence is still writing, so
you have him there. But like that's what I kept feeling when I was reading this. It wasn't that I was like in the story. I was like, I swear that line is literally in The Name of the Wind, or I swear that line is literally in the Nevernight Chronicle. I swear that line is literally in Strange the Dreamer.
That must have been a distracting thing to read.
But then I also did notice a particular name that you did not notice.
But you knew it going in.
I totally forgot about it. I did not like remember that had happened until I heard the name. And then I was like, that's right. That's in here. And oh, that's right. She didn't notice it.
I just feel like if you had never heard, you might have not noticed, is all I'm saying.
I know, because I was listening to it on audio, and as soon as I heard the name, I was like, that's this. Oh, it is.
Can I say something? Maybe if I was listening on audio, it would have been more obvious as well.
Maybe.
Because, you know, I just like, whatever, it's a name I don't care about. Am I really even reading the name? Like, who cares? I don't care about names. Yeah, I mean, I think 3 stars is like, that makes sense for you. As I'm saying, like, it was either
but
like.
I also get why you said it kind of reminded you of Strange the Dreamer.
Oh, did you? Okay. Yeah, I it has that very like dreamlike quality, very like love letter to books and stuff like that. And
I was actually thinking more so like just in terms of the literal plot, where like Lavinia, what's her name again? Lavira. Yeah, it's Lavira. She's like Laszlo, and then the other group are like the Godspawn.
Yeah,
and like they're parallel situations and journeys. But so like the thing too is that like, so for Strange the Dreamer, if that's like the comparison, I feel like we spend a lot fewer pages talking about like Laszlo and like who he is and where he is and what his life is and what his personality is like. And yet I have a much fuller like idea of like who Laszlo is than I do of Lavira, even though I spent so many more pages with her. So I feel like much more efficiently, I just have a sense of like not that I feel like we spent a lot of time in this book talking about, oh, and the library works like this. It's a little bit like the Deathly Hallows, where it's like all this stuff about like, here's this and here's that, and that's how this works. And this is like the unnatural way that I'm going to ask this question so that the reader can find out this information. And I'm just like, tell me who Lavira is, how she's like emotionally experiencing this new life in this new library. And that was missing for me.
This is how Bookborn 1 and Bookborn 2 differentiate themselves, which is like, I think probably the same reason those elements don't bother me are the same reasons that I'm down with Sanderson more than you are. Like, because I find those parts of a book very interesting. And in fact, it's one of the reasons that like one of the most disliked Stormlight books I like, because it's like super nitty gritty, like magic-y stuff. So I didn't even think.
And then another thing that this reminded me of that, again, I think the other thing is better, is the Dandelion Dynasty. Like there were so many parts where like it's trying to make a point, you know, about like access to knowledge and translation, and about like what it means to, you know, how you bring meaning to things and like it's reflected back at you, and like power imbalance and power being created, like all that kind of stuff. They're like attempting a conversation about that here. I just think that's executed so much better in the Dandelion Dynasty. There were, again, it felt like, well, this is like, that's the Frankenstein's monster of like these pieces that I'm like, those are good pieces because I love The Name of the Wind. I love the Dandelion Dynasty. I love Strange the Dreamer. I originally liked Nevernight Chronicle, but the part of Nevernight Chronicle that this reminded me of was the end, which was terrible. So like that was the bad thing. But the others, they're like things that I like. So it's reminding me mostly of things that I like, but I'm just like, but those ones, like, I don't know, they had that sauce where it was just like, I feel like I'm there with it and like emotionally invested in it. And I feel like I know like who these characters are and what they're going through when confronted with this. It's not just like, here's the information. Like it's also the experience of that character who's receiving that information. Because there were so many times like Lavira was like so like obviously asking a question that she would never ask. She's asking it because like we need the reader to find this answer out. So then she's going to like inquire about it and then receive the answer so that we learn more about this world.
I don't know. I feel so it's interesting you say that because I actually feel that I knew Livera really well. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the book is how he describes her and who she is. On the other hand, I felt like I never really got a great capture on the guy's name. Ivar, thank you. Like totally left my head. Ivar, like I felt like was more of a nebulous person to me. That felt more a little bit like basic, nice person.
Yeah, well,
it was a little harder for me to see Ivar, whereas I really felt like Livera felt like a full person to me. So like that's interesting, but I could see that criticism about some characters in the book for sure. But I don't know. It's interesting. Like I loved all the workings of the library. I really do feel like that must be the Sanderson in me. Like that was just so like fascinating to me. I loved it so much. So that's definitely we read differently in that way.
I feel like I would care about that after, like, I first have to care about the character. And then once I do, now I care about the world they are in. Tell me all the details of like what they're confronted with. But like we can't skip over the part where I have to care about the character. And I feel like that's what's missing for me. Where like
in the beginning, it's all about Livera. Like it starts with like, she's named Livera because she's a weed that you can't get rid of. And like, I don't know. I felt like that was such an evocative way to start. It told me all I needed to know in a very big way about her. Like I love those opening scenes with her because I do feel like it tells you a lot.
But see, like, okay, you keep using this word, which is also how I feel about it. It's telling. It's not showing. We do get told a great deal about Livera. But like I wanted scenes showing me the type of person that she is, not just constantly being told, oh, she asks a lot of questions. Oh, she's really inquisitive. Oh, she's really great at this. Oh, she's named after this. Like constantly being told these things. And I'm like, show me the scenes where like I come to those conclusions myself.
I'm going to give a preview, a spoiler for our Friday stream, which is like what you just said is something I'm going to say about one of the books you gave me.
I already know which one. And it's okay, you're wrong.
You don't know which one?
Yes,
you don't know which one.
I do.
So that's interesting. It's like interesting how we read the same books and felt that about different things. Because I didn't feel like, because I usually don't like being told and not shown, but I didn't feel that in the book That Wouldn't Burn. But like I'm not gonna say it wasn't there.
And I was also, like, this is spoilery, so I won't like say what, but there's a very significant thing about this plot that I'm surprised that you like this book because it's not your kind of thing.
Was it romance involved?
Yeah, but like it's very like insta-lovey, like very.
I mean, if I didn't allow myself to read or enjoy any book that had a romance plot I didn't like, I would never enjoy books ever again. So like if the book is good enough that I can ignore, like, and what's funny is the second book, which you probably won't read, so I'll make this broad statement. That's not a spoiler, but the second book does not focus on our two main characters in the way I think people expected it to. In fact, follows a new character quite significantly. And a lot of people were bothered by that, but for me, it was great because I was like, I don't really need to see that. Like, I don't really care about that aspect. And so it's funny that you say that because it was, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't like that. But I liked everything else enough that I just, I get over it. It's kind of like,
but see, like here, cause like, I felt like for me, like the payoff of like how things culminate for me, it seemed like you'd have to really care about that for the rest of this to kind of like feel significant and to like buy into what's going on. You'd have to buy into them. And I didn't buy into them. So I was just like,
I bought into it enough. I think for me, like, I don't have to ship it or feel super invested in the love story to care about if a character cares about someone else. So like,
I agree with that.
Even in Harry Potter, we'll use Harry Potter as an example because we just talked about it. Like, the worst part of me, I can't actually even say this. There was a character people were constantly saying if they died, they would be so upset. And I remember being like, I wouldn't really care if that character died, but I know it would be hard on Harry. So I guess I don't want them to die. And it's like, I don't really have to care that much about the character to care how it will affect someone. So like for me, I could read that and be like, well, this is important to both of them. And I do find it very compelling about why for him it would be because of what you find out about the machine he was in. That was compelling enough for me, even though like, yes, it definitely does have some elements of insta love. It wasn't romantic enough, honestly, to like really bother me.
Well,
You
so
know what
it's
I
like
mean? Like,
so like what you just said is what like I always say about The Name of the Wind, because people hate Denna, and I don't really like feel in like one way or the other about Denna. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm not in love with Denna, but I do feel like I intimately know Kvothe as a character, and like it's really important to him that he's obsessed with Denna, and so I'm like, that's what this is about. It's about how he feels about her, and I get him, and so like for me to like buy into this, like I need to like get Lavira and like get Ivar and like feel like, you know, them as people I'm on board with. And then like even if the love is insta, you know, I'd be like, but and like even in Harry Potter, like the romantic plot lines are not great. But like in general, the character work's pretty good. So
first of all, the romantic plot lines in Harry Potter, everyone wants to forget that these are friggin' 16-year-olds. And if you never immediately fell in love with someone when you were 16, good for you.
Well, it's definitely better in the book again.
You.
The characters or the actors had like no chemistry.
Ginny is the assassination that is done to Ginny in Harry Potter movies is horrific. She actually has a personality in the book.
Yeah. Well, so does Harry. So just like when you're saying that like Lavender Brown is a caricature, but so is Ron. Well, Ginny has a personality, but so does Harry. And so like they made them match.
So no personality. It's perfect.
Yeah. Caricature. Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like because I did connect with Lavira, I think that probably helped. But if you didn't connect with Lavira, then I feel like why would you care about what Lavira cares about? So like,
so that's why like in Strange the Dreamer, it's also definitely insta love. But I care about Laszlo. And so then I'm like, it's important for Laszlo. Like, this is how he feels about this. This is how he is experiencing.
I mean,
this. So,
the romance was the same for me in Strange the Dreamer. Like, I disliked that more than you, but Strange the Dreamer is so good that it overcame the dumb love. Yeah. So, like, that's the thing. Like, that's how I felt about it in The Book That Wouldn't Burn. Like, because I loved everything else about the book so much, it overcame it, and it wasn't enough for me to, like, hate it.
Well, like, that's why, like, I don't totally know, like, how to... All I can say is that, like, I don't know, the character, like, just, like, didn't compel me, or I wasn't convinced, because, like, so much about this it's reminiscent of The Name of the Wind, Strange of the Dreamer, of like Dandelion Dynasty, all these things where I'm like, the thing you're trying to do is a thing that I'm generally speaking extremely on board for, and like to read that, and those are the types of stories that I'm drawn to. And then I'm just like reading it and being like, could you like make it the way I want it to be so I can enjoy this more?
I don't see the Dandelion as much. I didn't get Dandelion Dynasty, but I see what you mean about like the themes it covers. Dandelion.
Yeah, not so much the plot and more like when we kind of like get through all of the mystery of what's happening and we're like arriving at the like what it all means and like why we're interested in this and like the ramifications like societally and culturally with what's going on. That's where I was like, oh, we're doing Dandelion Dynasty, but worse.
But different. I think they bring up different things. But also, like, yeah, Ken Liu. I mean, he's really good at that stuff. So,
and that's where too, like, he has a lot of like detail in those books. You know, the engineering and all that stuff, which like I do like less than the cultural stuff. But like the character work is, even though there's so many characters in the Dandelion Dynasty, like I feel like I do have a sense of them more so than I did for Lavira. And so then a lot of that detail stuff, because it's like important to the characters in Dandelion Dynasty, then like I'm invested in what's important to them.
The question I have is the problem you had with your other Mark Lawrence book similar in this one, or are they different? I couldn't remember what you didn't like about your other Mark Lawrence book. Red Sister?
No. Yeah, so... Yeah, I didn't really like Red Sister, but I did also read Prince of Thorns. And Prince of Thorns...
Prince of Thorns, I've been told not... Zach told me you should never read that in a million years.
Yeah, you shouldn't. But for all its flaws and faults and, you know, whateverness, like, which valid, all of that is true. I do think it's pretty compelling character work. Like, I feel like from the outset, this is a story where like you have to be kind of like fully like in the mind and which is not a great place to be, of a pretty horrendous main character. And so like, if you don't buy into that at all, ever, like you truly, that book would fall apart on page 1. And so I feel like, I don't know, he did it that well in Prince of Thorns, but there's other problems with Prince of Thorns. And then Red Sister, like the very beginning of Red Sister and also the very beginning of this, because like Red Sister actually begins somewhat similarly in vague terms, where it's like a very young girl who's kind of like taken out of her circumstances and thrust into like an educational environment. And they're kind of similar in kind of being kind of precocious pick-me type girl characters that feel, again, like that, where it's like, I feel like you are a list of attributes and not a person that I'm like the believe in the wholeness of. Does that make sense?
So, but it was worse in Red Sister, or is it about the same?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like there was a lot of characters in Red Sister that I felt that way about, and it felt sloggier to get through, where I was like, everything feels like I'm doing feminism. And it's like, oh, I don't know if you're doing feminism just because you're writing about a bunch of women.
Yeah, I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that in Book That Wouldn't Burn. So I just have to make a comment about like how red my face is right now. It's like really hot in this room. So I just need to make a comment about like why it looks like I have a sunburn.
It's because you're crying about the Book That Wouldn't Burn.
I just like shouldn't have worn a sweatshirt apparently. It got like so hot in here. Oops. I want to.
But there was like there was a line that's like repeated like a few times in this. That's like about how well, the line that's actually in here I won't know, but it's like almost identical to Name of the Wind, where it's like, we are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And I was just like, but Rothfuss said it better.
I don't know. I can't forgive Rothfuss right now, but I forget he was a really good writer. It's fine. We both read Octavia Butler, and we both love Miss Octavia. Is that true? Yes. I shouldn't speak for you. You love Miss Octavia, right? Just like I do.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'm a fan of hers.
But, you know, I had a very similar issue recently with Adrian Tchaikovsky, where like it was like a bunch of stuff happening.
Guns of Dawn was my first Adrian book, even though I've been wanting to read him for a while.
No, it was City of Last Chances, and then I was forced to read the second one. I wasn't planning to. Where it was like a lot of stuff. That book was like kind of reminiscent of Wisdom of Crowds, but it was like doing the whole narrative that's like in Age of Madness in one book plus 50 other things. And I was like, can we do the characters and how they're experiencing this and like what's going on with them instead of an onslaught of information that's like, there's some good stuff in here, there's some good themes in here, stuff that I like because it's really reminiscent of one of my all-time favorite trilogies, but like slow down and let me live in it a bit. And I feel like when people complain about Name of the Wind being slow and like being this like meandering like life story, I'm like, but that's what's so great about it. I'm like, I'm there, I'm like living Quoth's life with him, like that's what I want.
Yeah, I get it. Overall this year was about what it always is. It was maybe slightly higher. I feel like it maybe was slightly higher. We were averaging between 3 and 4 stars.
Yeah, and I think in the past I've definitely given a 2 or 2.
Have you? What did we do last year? Let's think about this real quick. I did Warbreaker last year.
No, Warbreaker was the first year. Last year was Emperor's Soul.
Oh, Emperor's Soul. Oh, yeah. What did you give that? Lower than a 3?
I think I gave it 2.
You gave it 2. That was but that wasn't on a thing that hurt my feelings though. That was on, do you have your coaster nearby? That's when we did
the coffee table.
You just don't want objects to be souls.
Yeah.
I gave you Emperor's Soul, and what else?
Oh, the Ted Chiang collection.
Oh, you also didn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year was a bad year actually. And then
I loved Invisible Women. That was excellent.
Oh yeah, but that didn't count. That's the nonfiction. I'm always pretty positive the nonfiction you'll like. Well, that's another one. You didn't like it. It made you violently angry, but it was a good one.
Which was the intended response.
And then what was the last one?
Song for the Void.
Oh yeah, that one was okay. You gave that a 3-star, but yes, it was a lot lower last year. And then the year before you gave Warbreaker 3 stars. Bad Feminist you gave 3 stars.
I don't even remember how many stars I gave them.
You gave, I know what you gave 5 stars to, which was The Paper Menagerie.
Oh, yes.
That you just cried through. So, I reread that a couple months ago, and Zach took this really mean video of me in bed sobbing. And he's like,
I took a video of myself sobbing. So.
And he was like, and he sent it to me like, this is your reread, and you're sitting in bed like you've never read it before. And I was like, whatever, I have a heart.
Honestly, so many books, movies, TV, everything, like it's worse when you actually know what's coming, because like the
Yes.
first time it hits you and you're not expecting it and you suddenly start crying. The second time, the entire lead up to it, you're already pre-crying because you know it's coming.
It makes everything else more painful. So that was a big win. And then what was the last book? What was
The first year?
the fourth one?
The timey-wimey one. The
How to Lose the Time War. Yeah. Which you didn't like.
Yeah, but I didn't hate it either. I think
that was like a 2 or 3. I think that was a 3. So anyway, this year was pretty good. You're hard to please.
We know that.
I got you bigger this year.
And we didn't talk about this at all, but like because you can finally get the Stephen Fry audiobooks of Harry Potter in the US, which only like that also is a very recent development, just like you learning about me not reading them. Like if you had chosen these for me to read like a few months earlier, I would not have been able to listen to Stephen Fry, which is a delightful way to experience these books. Highly recommend Stephen Fry.
I mean, this is the crazy thing. I have never listened to Harry Potter on audiobook.
Well, before you would have had to listen to the other guy, and
I know, but people love the other guy.
He's no.
I feel like I need to listen to both to figure it out. So
I've heard the other guy narrate Peter Pan, not Harry Potter, and he's the narrator in Pushing Daisies, the show. It's like I know what he sounds like.
I listened to Peter Pan. Did I hear him do Peter Pan?
There's probably like 5 or 6.
There's a million. I mean, who knows who I listen to.
Tim Curry did one of them, and that one's a good one.
I bet that's good. I've heard Tim Curry's on a few books. Supposedly he has a good little audio voice. But you know, I'm just not really good at audio.
For Peter Pan in particular, like the pirates and all of like the whimsy, he's so perfect for that.
I'm not super into audiobooks, so I don't listen to them very often. But anyway, yeah, it was a good year. I feel okay about it. I didn't like force you to read anything horrible this year.
I think it was all 3 and up.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think normal. I would give Half-Blood Prince 5 stars, and Deathly Hallows 3. The Dragon one 4 probably. Henry Lilacs 5, and Book That Wouldn't Burn probably 3.5.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look at that. We're like a 4 average. I feel good about that.
A high 4.
Yay me.
So 4. Devastate me on Friday with your 1 average.
Yeah, so Friday we're gonna talk on Leanna's channel where we'll
Revenge is the dish best served Friday.
The dish best served Friday, and I have all my notes in my phone about the 4 books that Leanna gave me. I guess I'll give you a little tease. Let's see. She had me read Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I can never say it. Tchaikovsky. I get it wrong. It's just my mouth doesn't want to say it.
Adrian T.
By Adrian T. And The Empire of Silence by Christopher Rucchio. I don't know. And I always forget what that title is because I want to call it Sun Eater. Like to me, it's just Sun Eater. There is no title for that book. And The Wolf by Leo Carew. And The Feminine Rage Pick, which is Shakespeare Was a Woman and Other Heresies.
Elizabeth Winkler.
By somebody. Rebecca.
Winkler.
What?
Elizabeth Winkler.
Oh, Elizabeth Winkler. That wasn't a great way that I said that, but hopefully you got it. And I have lots to say about all the books.
It's fine. Everything's fine. I haven't read The Wolf 30 times, but I have read it 8 times. So
yeah, Leanna and I were like, okay, so we both gave each other Feminine Rage, and we also both gave each other a book that's like, probably
here's my entire identity. Be gentle with it.
It's fine with the identity. Thanks so much, Chris. This is so nice. I really love that I made you appreciate A Feast for Crows more. I think that is like my one goal in this life now, when I found out that everyone hated A Feast for Crows. And it was my favorite. So
it has some peak Jamie.
It had peak Jamie. That's the thing. My favorite characters are Jamie and Brienne.
Can we like rewind the tape to when you first started the series? And I was like, my favorite character is Jamie Lannister. And you were like, I trust you.
Well, I did say I trust you, but in my head, because Kyle also told me Jamie was his favorite character. But in my head, I was like, I cannot wait to prove them wrong. I can't wait to read this series and be like, you're all wrong. And I don't, I just totally, I get why you like him, but I don't agree. And then it was like, number one favorite character, Jamie Lannister, pushed a kid out of a window. That's fine.
It's like first law, the real grimdark is the truths you learn about yourself along the way.
So anyway, gotta love Jamie Lannister. Let's see, random by I'm the only one excited for Rings of Power season 2. Absolutely on this chat. Because I'm not watching Rings of Power. I've already informed Liene that I will be watching her recaps and not the show itself. But we appreciate your service.
I was like a few months ago, randomly, like 3 different people in completely 3 different like situations and places in my life, all brought up Rings of Power and how good it was and how they were excited for it. And they were all people that I didn't know well enough to be honest with, where I had to just be like, yep, that was a thing that was on television.
So that's funny. First of all, that's great. Seriously, she's not my favorite character in the way Jamie is. It's like Jamie I'd protect with my life. Now, seriously, the most interesting person on the page whenever she's there. Yes, she is. She's a queen,
She's kooky
just
bananas.
totally unhinged. I was visiting a friend recently, and he loves Rings of Power, but he knows that I hate it. We are close enough friends for me to be like, you have bad taste, and that's a bad show. And so I was visiting them and staying at their house or whatever. And he's like, him and his wife. And they're like, we should watch a show before bed. And I was like, great, put something on. And then I went into my room to just like get in PJs, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And he texts me and he's like, okay, we ended up putting on this if you want to come watch. And it was like a screenshot of Rings of Power. And I was like, I think I'm just going to go to bed. And then I hear them just laughing from the other room. And they're like, we were just teasing. We put on Community. I was like, come out. I was like, rude. He's like, we know you hate it and you would never rewatch it in a million years. So anyway, I have told people that I dislike it. So
we shall see what season 2 will bring. Oh no, you froze again. Well, we're almost done anyway. All right. I think Jeff Bezos has knocked out your internet because he heard your hot takes about the flagship show, Rings of Power. Well, this has all been very exciting. And we look forward to seeing you all on Friday, where Bookborn will break my heart.
Now there's 2 of me.
There's been 2 of you. Now there's 3 of you.
There's been 2 of me this whole time. Okay, well, bye. This isn't working anymore, so I'm